Hey guys, how y'all doing today? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank y'all for joining me today. This is episode 162 of Hockey on the Spot. And, well, this is it, guys. We've done it. We have reached the final episode of the 30 Teams in 30 Days segment. We are up to our final team, our third and final California team, our final team in the Pacific Division, our final team in the Western Conference, and just our final team overall. We've reached the promised land, so let's get right to it. The final team in the NHL's 30 Teams in 30 Days, and that team is none other than the Anaheim Ducks. So let's talk about it, as Brian Hayward, or as their announcer John Allers would say. Let's talk about it. So, for the Anaheim Ducks last season, it was just a fantastic regular season for the club. Words could not describe how well the team played last year. They were one of the best teams in the National Hockey League, and they were the best team in the Western Conference, finishing the year 54, 20, and 8 for a total of 116 points. It's first in the Pacific Division, first in the Western Conference, and second overall in the whole entire league. Only the Boston Bruins finished the season with more points than the Anaheim Ducks last year. They finished with one more point than the Ducks to win the President's Trophy. The Ducks last season really opened a lot of eyes. It was a franchise year, a first ever 50-plus win season. That's the most wins they've ever had. 54 wins is the most wins they've ever had, and 116 points is the most they've ever had. It was the first time in their history that they finished first in the entire conference. They were just unbelievable last year, and this all came without having a legitimate second line center the whole entire year. Something that they haven't had since Andy McDonald was a part of the team back in 2007. They traded him in late 2007 to the St. Louis Blues, and ever since that trade, the Ducks have been left without a legitimate number 2 center. They've had guys who were supposed to fill the role, like the player who they got in return for Andy McDonald, Doug Weight, but he was a big disappointment for the club. Brendan Morrison, but he was a big disappointment. And Saku Koivu. Saku Koivu lived up to that hype in his first year in Anaheim, but his remaining seasons with the Ducks, he developed into more of a third-line, fourth-line shutdown center. He wasn't actually a disappointment with the Ducks. He just played a different kind of role with the team. So in all due respect, they did not have a legitimate second-line center last year. Their defense was not the best in the league, and they still finished number 1 in the Western Conference. That is just absolutely impressive, because one thing they had a lot of last year was depth. They were one of the best depth teams in the league as far as being depth-heavy. They're going to be one of the depth-heaviest teams going into the season this year. And so last year, just so many positives to take out of the club. I mean, obviously they had a terrible first game of the season. They got destroyed by the Colorado Avalanche 6-1. And that opened up a lot of concern, obviously, for the club. But they ultimately came back and would just go on an absolute tear from there. They had Matthew Perreault, who they got in a trade from the Washington Capitals last year. He had a breakout season, though he was inconsistent at times. Nick Bonino also had a career year. He never officially made it to a second-line center role. he was always playing more on the third or fourth line, but he did have 22 goals and 49 points, and he was a plus player. Not to mention, he was the Ducks' biggest clutch player. He scored clutch goals in clutch situations. So, great year for Nick Bonino. And the Ducks just had a lot of players who came up huge for them last year. Jonas, including the goaltender Jonas Hiller. For Jonas Hiller, it was, at one point, he was one of the better players in the entire league. But then toward the end, he struggled. But before he started to struggle, he was one of the best goaltenders in the league. He propelled the Ducks to a franchise-high 10-game winning streak, and he had a personal high 14 consecutive wins, which also was on pace to an NHL record. He just came short of the record, unfortunately, but he did set his name in the history books at the very least. So, but unfortunately, though, for Jonas Hiller, after that run, he slipped. His game slipped, and he wasn't the same. He started playing inconsistently, and he just became untrustworthy in net. Which is why, but the good news for the Ducks last year was that they had the goaltender that was probably the top rookie goaltender in the National Hockey League in Frederik Andersen. The Frederik Andersen became the first ever Danish goaltender to play in the National Hockey League last year, and he really opened a lot of eyes. He, of course, originally was a 7th rounder back in 2010 by the Carolina Hurricanes, but they didn't sign him, and he had to re-enter the draft in 2012, and in 2012, he was taken by the Ducks in the 3rd round. So, he has been a Duck ever since, and he has been excellent for the Ducks. He was a guy who came up because of the injury to Victor Foss. Victor Foss suffered an injury early on in the year, and he missed most of the season. So that was a big blow to the Ducks. And a lot of other positives came from the season as well. For example, Ryan Getzlaf finished 2nd in the league in points last year with 87 points, and he had a career high 31 goals last year. He had an unbelievable season. Through 77 games played, 31 goals, 56 assists, 87 points, which was 2nd in the league. Only Sidney Crosby of the Pittsburgh Penguins had more. Ryan Getzlaf, of course, was also a Hart Trophy candidate, along of course, with Claude Giroux, who finished 1 point behind Getzlaf. But Getzlaf was a plus 28, which led all Calder Hart Trophy finalists. He only had 31 penalty minutes, the least amount of penalty minutes among the Hart Trophy finalists, and 204 shots on goal. Ryan Getzlaf absolutely took his game up to a complete other level last season. It wasn't his career year as far as points. That mark still held from the 2008-2009 season when he had 91 points. He probably would have set that mark if he hadn't missed those 5 games and if he didn't struggle coming out of the Olympic break. After the Olympic break, he did struggle a little bit, and he did come down to earth. He wasn't scoring as many goals. He became really more of the playmaker, Ryan Getzlaf, again. So he really did struggle. He did struggle quite a bit after the Olympics. After the Olympics, he only had 2 goals after representing Team Canada in the Olympics, along, of course, with his twin, Corey Perry. Corey Perry had another great year, and it actually was a comeback year for Corey Perry because he was just not really that good during the lockout shortened year. Last year was a big comeback year for him. Through 81 games played, 43 goals, he led the Ducks in goal scoring, 39 assists, and 82 points. a plus 32 rating, 65 penalty minutes, and 280 shots on goal. Again, nowhere near his Hart Trophy numbers from 2010-2011, but still a very good season and a major comeback year when you consider the way he played over the past 2 seasons relative to his Hart Trophy season, particularly the lockout shortened year. That was a very rough season for Corey Perry, particularly in the playoffs that year. But both Perry and Getzlaf were phenomenal in the playoffs as well. For Ryan Getzlaf, he through 12 games, 4 goals, 11 assists, and 15 points. He was a -2, but he only had 10 penalty minutes and 32 shots on goal, so he was great. And as for Corey Perry, 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points. He was a -2 as well, but 19 penalty minutes and 38 shots on goal through 13 games. He played one more game than Getzlaf. But you look at both of them, they are arguably the best duo in the National Hockey League. They both played for Team Canada at the Olympics. The Ducks had quite a few Olympians last year. That also included Cam Fowler, who played for Team USA, Jakob Silfverberg, who played for Team Sweden. Both Teemu Selanne and Saku Koivu Teemu Selanne and Sami Vatanen represented Team Finland. Koivu was invited to go play, but he declined the offer. And then Jonas Hiller was the starting goaltender for Team Switzerland. Getzlaf and Perry obviously were gold medalists. Jakob Silfverberg was a silver medalist, and both Selanne and Vatanen were bronze medalists. So, while Cam Fowler and his U.S. team lost in the bronze medal game. So, a great year, again, for Ducks Olympians. Great year just all around for the Ducks. And then coming out of the Olympic break, they started out good up until the trade deadline came around. When the trade deadline came around, the Ducks tried to pretty much in a nutshell, the Ducks tried to go for a home run. This is probably what kind of killed their season, made them come back down to earth, and prevented them from winning the President's Trophy. Because they had a high lead on the President's Trophy race, but they lost it because they started losing consecutive games after the deadline. I believe they even lost 6 in a row at one point or something like that. They went on a long losing streak at one point in the season. But they tried to do a lot at the trade deadline, and that included trading, and they even traded away pieces so that they could get the players they wanted to fill the pieces. One player that they did want to go get was Thomas Vanek from the New York Islanders. And the Ducks gave the Islanders a very substantial offer to get Thomas Vanek. They even traded Dustin Penner away to the Washington Capitals to make room to get Vanek. Penner, of course, was not the same when he went to Washington. And then that same draft pick that they got in that trade, they sent to the Dallas Stars to acquire veteran defenseman Stefan Robida, who was pretty good for them when he was healthy, but ultimately got hurt in the playoffs and missed the rest of the postseason. The Ducks really missed him in the playoffs, and we'll get to that later. They also traded Victor Fost when he was finally healthy. They dealt him to the Edmonton Oilers to acquire some draft picks. But the Ducks, they tried to go for a home run and get both Thomas Vanek from the New York Islanders and Ryan Kessler from the Vancouver Canucks. But the Canucks were unwilling to move Kessler at the time, and the price to get Kessler at the time was much higher than it turned out to be at the draft. And we'll get into that in a little bit. As for Thomas Vanek, it looked really good that he was going to be a Duck, and it almost looked final, but ultimately Garth Snow turned his back on a really substantial offer filled with prospects and futures and first-round picks, and instead chose to trade him to the Montreal Canadiens, where all they got in return was one prospect in Sebastian Kohlberg. A good prospect, but it's only one prospect, and a second-round pick, not a first-round pick. So Garth Snow messed that up, and that also kind of messed up the Ducks' season. They were left high and dry, and their trade deadline was wasted, trading Dustin Penner for absolutely nothing, and all they got in return was Stefan Robidas. And trading Victor Foss, but they were going to do that regardless because of how deep they were in goal. So now we're in after the trade deadline. Robidas doesn't even come back and play right away because he's still injured. And the Ducks, they struggle. They struggled. They were losing games, and they just did not look like the same Anaheim team we saw when Dustin Penner was playing and being experimented on the line with Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry. Ultimately, though, the Ducks did somewhat get back on track, and they ultimately clinched the Pacific Division after losing it for a temporary period of time. They had a big lead on the division title, but they lost it for a little bit. They ended up losing it to the San Jose Sharks for a slight period of time, but ultimately they came back, beat the Sharks in the third to final game of the season, and took the division title back and clinched it as well. But they got robbed of a President's Trophy. They got robbed of the President's Trophy. The Boston Bruins would get it by 1 point. But, again, despite the fact that they struck out at the trade deadline, they had a great season, and it was a great season for them. I already mentioned some of the player statistics, but it was also a great season as a team. Anaheim Ducks last year, first in the league in goals for percentage at 3.21%. They had the most goals in the National Hockey League last season, or the highest goals for percentage. Even goals against, they were one of the better teams. They were in the top 10. They were 9th in the league at 2.48%, which is again, it's not the top 5, but it's a really good position to be in. And plus-minus wise, they were second in the league in plus-minus at a plus 64. Only the Boston Bruins had a higher plus-minus, but they had a higher plus-minus by a long shot at a plus 80. So they were the best plus team in the league by a long shot. The Ducks also had the Ducks also were one of the better teams in the league when they trailed in games. It seemed when they were on a roll, they always seemed to have a habit of having a terrible first period in which they would let up 1 or 2 goals, and then in the second period of games, they would just come out flying and take the lead and ultimately go on to win. That seemed to be the theme for the Ducks in almost every game when they were hot last season. Which is great, but at the same time, it does tell you that there was some major flaws with the team. And one of the big flaws in particular was their special teams. But first of all, they were in the middle of the pack as far as penalties taken. They were in the bottom 15. They were 17th in the league at 10.9%, tied for 16th with the Colorado Avalanche, but the Avalanche are considered higher. So the Ducks were technically one of the more penalized teams in the league. And then we got the special teams. On the penalty kill, they were decent. They were decent. They were in the top 15 half of the league. They were 13th in the league at 82.2%, just barely ahead of both the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Edmonton Oilers. So their penalty killing was all right. It got better as the season went along, but their power play absolutely struggled. We look at the lockout-shortened season. Going back to the lockout-shortened season for a minute. That year, their power play was 4th in the league at 21.5%. Only the Washington Capitals, Pittsburgh Penguins, and Philadelphia Flyers had better power plays than the Ducks in the lockout-shortened year. Last season, major setback year here. 22nd in the league on the power play at an exact 16%. Not good at all. And at one point in the season, their power play was dead last in the league. It got better when they put Ryan Getzlaf at the point. He is very good at the point, and he is a forward who's able to get back when the puck is cleared, prevent shorthanded chances. He's learned to play a two-way game. He's not just an offensive player anymore. Last season, he really learned how to refine his defensive game, and he really became a two-way player and a power forward as well. He has truly become the best player on this team. And you think about both him and Corey Perry and the big contracts they signed, the big contract extensions they signed during the lockout Jordan year, 10 days apart. Normally, players who signed to that much term do not come out good and do not live up to their contracts. These guys, however, major exception to the rule. They both have come out flying. They were both absolutely fantastic in their first seasons of their new contracts. Obviously, one of the big questions will be, can they hold themselves together and either equal or better their performances from last year? Ryan Getzlaf in particular, after the rough final quarter of the season that he had, as far as goal scoring was concerned, he'll definitely look to improve on those 31 goals, because we're talking about a potential 40-goal season for him had he been a little bit more consistent with his goal scoring coming out of the Olympics. But the power play, again, it was a big problem and a big surprise considering all the talent and all the stars and all the depth that they had on their team last year. One reason for a lackluster power play could have been the aging Teemu Selanne and the fact that he finally showed his age last season. As far as scoring was concerned, he did play well. It's not like he played bad in games. He did play well and generate chances. But last season, through 64 games played, 9 goals, 18 assists, and 27 points. He was a +8, and he only had 12 penalty minutes, and he did generate 111 shots on goal. But he really it was a real struggle of a season for him offensively. He really never got going. He did pick it up somewhat in the playoffs, though. He had 6 points in 12 games, 2 goals, 4 assists. He was a -2 rating, but he was a -2 rating. He had 4 penalty minutes, and he had 24 shots on goal. So, it was a good. He got a little better in the playoffs. Where he really shined last year was for Team Finland in the Olympics. Through 6 games, he was a point-a-game player. 4 goals, 2 assists, +3, only 4 penalty minutes, and 15 shots on goal, while being named MVP of the 2014 Sochi Olympics last season. So it was a great way for the Finnish Flash to go out in his final Olympic season. So after all that, with all those statistics out of the way now, I already mentioned their record, 54, 20, and 8, first in the Pacific, first in the West, and second in the league, only 1 point behind the Boston Bruins. And now we get to the playoffs. Ducks have home ice advantage in the first round. They go on to play the Dallas Stars in the opening round of the playoffs. And the Stars actually gave the Ducks quite a scare. The Ducks took a 2-0 series lead, winning both games at home. But then going into games 3 and 4 in Dallas, the Ducks absolutely struggled. The Dallas Stars came back and went on to tie the series at 2 apiece. The only positive that came out of Game 4 was that after all this time, Brian Allen would finally score his first goal as a Duck, but that ultimately would not make a difference. Dallas would still win that game. The Ducks would come back in Game 5, and actually I believe Ryan Getzlaf missed Game 4, if I recall. Yes, he did, because from the broken jaw, I believe, or broken jaw, I believe. because he took a puck to the face in game 1, or I believe game 1. Sustained it for the games 2 and 3, I think. But then came back, missed game 4, but came back in game 5 and was absolutely dominant. The Ducks dominated game 5. And then game 6, probably the most interesting game of the whole series. The Dallas Stars took a 4-2 lead in the game. It looked like the Ducks were finished. Frederik Andersen had given up 4 goals. They put Jonas Hiller in, and he holds them down the rest of the way, making 12 saves and 12 shots. And they pull him for the extra skater with literally, I think, like 3 minutes to go or something like that. Basically a Patrick Waugh play, something Patrick Waugh has made famous this past year, pulling the goaltender extremely early in the final minutes. And it went on to work for the Ducks. They would go on to erase the 4-2 deficit and come back to tie the game at 4. And then in overtime, Nick Bonino would score the overtime winner to clinch a 4-2 series victory over the Dallas Stars and would send the Ducks to the second round of the playoffs, only to run into their arch rivals, the Los Angeles Kings. It was the first ever playoff series between the two arch rivals, and it was not a good series for Ducks fans at all, because not only did the Los Angeles Kings win the series in 7 games, but they eventually would go on to win the Stanley Cup, beating the New York Rangers in 5 games. But that, of course, it didn't come easy for the Kings. The Ducks held their own and sent it to 7 games. They lost the first 2 games at home to the Kings. Game 1 was just an absolute robbery for the Ducks. They had a 2-1 lead until Marian Gaborik scored in the final 7 seconds, and then a bad defensive play by Brian Allen would lead to Gabby's overtime winner. Game 2 was just no contest. The Kings dominated that game. But then the Ducks got revenge in games 3 and 4, winning both of those games in LA. 2 big games. John Gibson even started, I believe, in game 4, and he got a shutout in his first ever playoff game, which he also had a shutout in his first ever regular season game, too. An 18-save shutout against the Vancouver Canucks in Vancouver. And the shutout in the playoffs was a 28-save shutout. Game 5, the Ducks did get off to an early jump in that game. The Kings almost came back to tie that one, but the Ducks held their own and took a 3-2 series lead. Game 6 was a very defensive game, not a lot of shots generated, and that's what gave the Kings the advantage in that game at home. They went on to tie the series, and then Game 7 at the Honda Center for all the marbles. The Ducks did not show up the Ducks just did not show up to Game 7, and it showed from the opening face-off win by the Kings. The Kings absolutely demolished the Ducks in Game number 7 by a final score of 6-2, and that would mark and Game 7 against the LA Kings not only marked the Ducks' playoff exit after a franchise regular season, but it also marked the final game of the career of Teemu Selanne. He was sent back out on the ice to salute the crowd, and that was it. The Kings obviously went on to defeat the Chicago Blackhawks in 7 games in the Western Conference Finals, and then went on to defeat the New York Rangers in 5 games in the Stanley Cup Finals and won their second Stanley Cup in 3 years. But again, a lot of positives for the Ducks to take out of that season, and it was a learning experience. It shows you that they're getting closer. It was obviously their second consecutive home game disappointment in a Game 7. They obviously suffered that in the first round of the lockout-shortened year when they were eliminated in 7 games by the Detroit Red Wings. But all it showed for the Ducks, really, losing to an arch rival still burns in their minds to this day, and it motivated them to have it's going to motivate them to have a better season this year. And one thing it definitely did motivate General Manager Bob Murray and head coach Bruce Boudreau to do was give the team an off-season to remember. A franchise off-season. This is normally not a franchise known for making big moves in the off-season, but they did. This time they did. But we'll start with the losses that they suffered for this season. And one of them obviously being right winger Teemu Selanne, as I said, who is officially retired from National Hockey League play. But he may still play. He may still play following this season. He's still pondering an offer from Jokerit of the KHL. They moved from the Finnish league to the KHL, and Teemu Selanne is mulling a one-year offer where he could take either $5 million to play just home games or $10 million to play the whole season. It's a tempting offer for him. He has yet to decide, but ultimately he is retired from the National Hockey League. And good news for Ducks fans, Teemu Selanne's number 8 this coming season will be the first in Anaheim Ducks franchise history to have his number go up to the rafters. His number 8 will be retired on January 11th of 2015 at home against the Winnipeg Jets, and a very fitting opponent for this to happen. They also let go of centerman Saku Koivu, whose contract ran out. He had a good year for the Ducks last year defensively, but it was time for him to go as the Ducks are looking to get younger this season. Last year, though, through 65 games played, 11 goals, 18 assists, and 29 points. 2 more points than what he had in the lockout-shortened year. He was a +3, 46 penalty minutes, and 81 shots on goal. But through 13 games in the playoffs, he honestly did not do that great. He really struggled in the playoffs. He didn't have any goals. He only had 1 assist. He was a -3, and he only had 5 shots on goal, though he did only take 8 penalty minutes. So he did struggle in the playoffs. But this also potentially means the end of the career of Saku Koivu, a player who, unfortunately, another class act player, but unfortunately, he's never been past the second round of the playoffs in his career. That's where it seems his career is going to go, but he's still pondering retirement. He's definitely not going to be back with the Ducks, but he still is pondering retirement. He's still pondering if he'll come back this season or not. He may come back and play one more year, but it would be with another team. The rumors are he would either go play with his brother and the Minnesota Wild, or that he would go back to the Montreal Canadiens and finish his career where he started. Both of those are possibilities, but again, he will not be back with the Ducks this season. But a class act player, another player that I've always enjoyed since his days with the Montreal Canadiens. Just an inspiring player to watch. Always had great speed, and he's another guy who I'm personally going to miss. I'm going to miss both of those two players, both among the greatest Finnish players to ever play the game. Teemu Selanne, probably the greatest Finnish player, and second greatest European behind Jaromir Jagr, who of course is still playing. He re-signed with the New Jersey Devils this year. But then the Ducks did have other losses, and all the other losses they had were players that did go to other teams. Jonas Hiller was let go after his inconsistent finish. He was benched in the playoffs as proof that his tenure in Anaheim was over. He's 32 years of age. He'll be 33 February 12th. Last year, through 50 games, 29, 13, and 7 with 5 shutouts, a 2.48 goals against average, and 9.11 save percentage. However, most of his success from last year, again, came at the midpoint of the year and the beginning of the year. After he won 14 games in a row, he really came down to earth and just really struggled after that. And in the playoffs, he didn't play much. Through 6 games played, he was 2-2. And the 2 wins he had weren't even starts. He had a 2.19 goals against average and 9.06 save percentage. So, big blow to Jonas Hiller. He went on to sign a 2-year deal with the Calgary Flames to hopefully solidify their position in goal. Not to mention a lot of drama between Hiller and the Ducks after he signed with the Calgary Flames. There have been supposed reports of him totally bashing the Ducks and their fan base. So, which absolutely means his tenure in Anaheim is now over, not just for now, but for good. This also makes room for the 20-year-old or 21-year-old Ducks top prospect John Gibson to come up and really make an impression. He really played great in the opportunities he got last season, even though he did lose his final 2 games and absolutely was horrible in Game 7. Everyone's human. Everyone is human, including great prospects like John Gibson, but that doesn't change the fact that he is going to be a fantastic player in the future. Same goes for Frederik Andersen. Frederik Andersen, who last year, through 28 games, finished 20-5 with no overtime losses. He didn't have any shutouts, but he had a 229 goals against average and 923 save percentage. He was really good. And then in the playoffs, he was through 7 games. He was 3-2 with a 310 goals against and 899 save percentage. Unfortunately, his postseason came to an end in Game 3 against the Los Angeles Kings. He suffered a season-ending injury, but he's expected to come back from that injury and come back healthier than ever. And then other players let go. They lost Daniel Winnick he along with Saku Koivu and Jonas Hiller were all informed that they would not be back in Anaheim. Daniel Winnick was a recent signing, actually. He went on to sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He'll help them out in the analytics department. They let go of veteran defenseman, and sole trade deadline acquisition from last year, Stefan Robida. He went on to sign a 3-year deal also with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He's considerably their biggest signing. And they also let go of center Matthew Perreault. They didn't qualify him when he became a restricted free agent, thus sending him into unrestricted free agency, and he went on to sign a 3-year deal with the Winnipeg Jets. So, honestly, I still don't understand why the Ducks let him go. I think he makes their center depth better. I thought they were going to re-sign him. I think they probably let him go because of his lack of size. But last year he was really good. Through 69 games, 18 goals, 25 assists, 43 points, a plus 13, 36 penalty minutes, and 120 shots on goal, all career highs. And through 11 playoff games, 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points, minus 4, 18 penalty minutes, and 15 shots on goal. So he did struggle a little bit in the playoffs. He battled injuries at a lot of points in the season. But he ultimately was a good player for the Ducks last year and really reminded many of an Andy McDonald type player. He'll be a good player for the Jets, though. So I still don't understand this departure, but whatever it works out best for the Ducks. May have been cap reasons, or because of his poor play in the playoffs, or because of his lack of size. No one knows. We don't know. Maybe they weren't getting along in the signing process. Who knows? But ultimately, Perreault is gone, and he is a Winnipeg Jet now. And then, for the Anaheim Ducks, they also let go of center Nick Bonino and defenseman Lucas Spiza, and we're going to talk about that right now. For the Anaheim Ducks, they traded both of them along with their 24th overall pick and the 85th overall pick to the Vancouver Canucks. And in return from the Vancouver Canucks, they got centerman Ryan Kessler and a 3rd-round pick in 2015. But in this trade, the Ducks, yes, acquired Ryan Kessler from the Vancouver Canucks. It was a major race between a lot of teams to get Ryan Kessler. A lot of teams were interested. In addition to the Ducks, the Chicago Blackhawks and the Pittsburgh Penguins were also rumored to be among the top teams interested in Ryan Kessler's services. The Chicago Blackhawks especially, I believe they even went out of their way to make an offer for Kessler and acquire him. and I believe they even had a pretty decent offer for him. But ultimately, it was the Anaheim Ducks who would get Ryan Kesler. They wanted him at the trade deadline. That they struck out on him at the deadline because Vancouver GM at the time, Mike Gillis, did not want to let him go. But ultimately, it is a good thing that the Ducks didn't get him then, because if they had gotten him at the deadline, the price for him at the deadline was way more expensive than it was this time around at the draft. But they ultimately got him, but they had to say goodbye to depth center and clutch scorer Nick Bonino, depth defenseman Lucas Spiza, their first-round 24th overall pick, which the Vancouver Canucks ultimately used to select centerman Jared McCann, and the third-round 85th overall pick, which Vancouver actually didn't keep. They ultimately traded that pick to the New York Rangers to acquire forward Derek Dorsett. But as I said, the Ducks got a third-round pick for 2015 in that trade as well, a pick that they've yet to use. And that draft is supposed to be a very deep draft. So what the Ducks get with that pick could be substantial. But there's no doubt that the Ryan Kesler trade was without a doubt the second biggest trade of the offseason. Only the Jason Spezza trade was bigger. Obviously, Jason Spezza was dealt to the Dallas Stars by the Ottawa Senators. That was the biggest trade of the offseason, but the Ryan Kesler trade is a very close second. This was the player the Ducks have been looking for a very long time. And this is the guy who's going to give the Ducks that second-line center depth that they were looking for since they traded Andy McDonald in 2007. This is a guy who possesses the puck well. He really possesses the puck well. A good analytics type player. Can make plays, can score clutch goals. Last year was a bit of a rough season for Ryan Kesler, and actually, when it really came down to it, Nick Bonino actually had more points than Ryan Kesler, but at the same time, Ryan Kesler was playing under John Tortorella, and the two just didn't mesh well. Through 77 games last year, Kesler had 25 goals, 18 assists, 43 points, minus 15 rating, 81 penalty minutes, and 239 shots on goal. And he also represented Team USA at the Olympics for a second straight Olympic and had 1 goal, 3 assists, and 4 points in 6 games, a plus 6 rating, and 7 shots on goal while staying out of the box. But Ryan Kesler, though, so because of playing under Tortorella, he wasn't at his best, and also a situation where he wasn't enjoying his surroundings and wasn't enjoying the team he was playing for. Wasn't enjoying the team that he was playing for. And stuff like that can lead to bad seasons. It's true. So Ryan Kesler, unhappy with his surroundings, wanted out of Vancouver, asked GM Jim Benning to trade him. He had a limited no-trade clause where he got to choose the list of teams he would go to, and ultimately the Anaheim Ducks were at the top of his list, and he got traded to the Ducks and is expected to really bring some depth to their organization. He'll help them out at center. Again, possesses the puck. He may not be the fastest player in the National Hockey League, but he does stay up on his skates, handles the puck well. Really good player in the analytics department. Has really good hands and makes great first passes and can really shoot the puck well. He was Vancouver's 23rd overall pick in the 2003 NHL entry draft. But he'll also help out their power play, and he's also really good at winning face-offs. When he's playing at his best, he is among the best face-off winning centers in the league. And, over the last few years, Kesler has been among the best face-off winning centers in the league. So he'll be a great addition for them. He'll help them win face-offs especially against a Los Angeles Kings team who just beat them in so many draws during the playoffs. Even though the Ducks dominated the Kings in the regular season, and that included the first ever Stadium Series game out in California at Dodger Stadium, the Ducks won that game 3-0 as the road team. But despite the fact that they dominated the Kings in the regular season, it's the playoffs that really matters most, and the Kings were a better built team for the playoffs than the Ducks. The Ducks are a better built team than the Kings for the regular season, but when it comes down to the playoffs, the Kings are better. They are a team built for the playoffs, and that's what the Ducks have to be. They have to be built for both the regular season and the playoffs. And Ryan Kesler, who is their big addition this offseason, is the player that is going to help them in that department. He'll also help out their power play. But that was not the only addition that the Ducks would make. Obviously, again, Nick Bonino. Luke is, to me, is somewhat of a big loss for the Ducks. A career year for Nick Bonino last year. Through 77 games, 22 goals, 27 assists, 49 points, plus 14, 22 penalty minutes, 159 shots on goal, and in 13 playoff games, 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points, plus 3, 8 penalty minutes, and 22 shots on goal. And one of those goals included the overtime winner in Game 6 against the Dallas Stars to send the Ducks to the second round. So Ryan Kesler had more goals last season than Nick Bonino. He had 25, but Nick Bonino had more assists and more points and a better plus-minus and less penalty minutes as well. And Nick Bonino was in the playoffs. So that's a big loss for the Ducks, but one well worth it when you're getting a guy like Ryan Kesler. Lucas Spiza, he really fell out of the Ducks' favor last year because of all the injuries he had to deal with last year. And even when he was back healthy, he really struggled last year. He only played 30 games and had 1 goal, 5 assists, and 6 points. But he's more of a shutdown defenseman to begin with. But he was even in the plus-minus rating, 43 penalty minutes and 30 shots on goal. But he did have problems with turnovers, and he couldn't handle the puck as well last year. And he only played in 2 playoff games, including Game 6 against the Stars. He actually played well in Game 6 against the Stars, but he didn't play well the following game. Game 5 against the Stars he played well, but he didn't play well in Game 6. He only had 1 assist. He was a -2, 5 penalty minutes, and 3 shots on goal. He'll be expected to have a comeback year, and he'll be expected to add depth on the Vancouver Canucks blue line. But again, another player well worth giving up when you have Ryan Kesler. And the first-round pick that they gave to Vancouver was expendable because they already had the Ottawa Senators' 10th overall pick, which the Ducks ultimately used to select big, strong power forward Nick Ritchie from the Peterborough Petes. He, of course, is the younger brother of Dallas Stars top prospect Brett Ritchie. And we'll talk more about that later. But Ryan Kesler was not the only addition the Ducks made. He was the big addition for the Ducks, the biggest addition, but he wasn't the only addition that they made. They also added, through free agency, they added goaltender Jason LaBarbera. He's coming over from the Edmonton Oilers. Personally, I don't like the signing, but it's only to a 1-year deal, and he's only being added to add veteran leadership to 2 really young goaltenders, in Frederik Anderson and John Gibson, and maybe come up and play if either A, one of them gets hurt, or B, one of them is underachieving and needs to go down to Norfolk to spend a little bit of time. And right after the Stanley Cup Finals were over, they also added former first-round 18th overall pick from the 2009 NHL draft, Louis LeBlanc. They acquired him in a trade with the Montreal Canadiens as a restricted free agent in exchange for a 5th-round pick, and ultimately the Ducks would sign him to a 1-year deal. His most likely destination will be the American Hockey League again, but he'll add depth to the AHL, to their AHL squad out in Norfolk, and at the very least battle in camp for a spot. But they also, and then the other trade that they made over the offseason, they acquired centerman Nate Thompson coming over from the Tampa Bay Lightning in exchange for both a 4th and a 7th round pick. I think giving up 2 picks for that kind of a player may be a bit much, but Nate Thompson last year was one of the better fourth-line players in the National Hockey League and has been one of the better fourth-liners in the NHL. He's 29 years of age. He'll be 30 on October 5th. But the Anchorage, Alaska native is one of those fourth-line forwards that you need on your team. A fourth-line centerman who can take face-offs, wins a lot of face-offs, can skate well, and doesn't take too many penalties, and is very good defensively. The Ducks want to get better on their penalty kill, because their penalty kill was okay last year, but there was definitely room for improvement, and they needed a fourth-line penalty-killing center, really to replace Saku Koivu, and Nate Thompson will help them in that department. Again, he's more of a defensive forward, so he's not going to score a lot, but he'll definitely help out their penalty kill and generate shorthanded chances. Last year, through 81 games with the Tampa Bay Lightning, 9 goals, 7 assists, 16 points, a +3 rating, and that +3 rating is actually a career high for him. 27 penalty minutes and 105 shots on goal. He didn't do anything through 4 games in the playoffs as the Lightning got swept by the Montreal Canadiens, and he was a -1, and he only had 4 shots on goal. But again, he's not a guy who's going to score. His best attribute is his ability to win faceoffs, and he'll probably be toggled between both of the bottom 2 lines, but his most likely destination will be the 4th line. But he's a good addition for the Ducks, a player that they need, and a player that they absolutely need, actually. So, great addition by the Ducks. And their big signing through the free agents. And then in free agency, their big signing was a player who, from an argumental standpoint, maybe was a little bit overpaid, considering the position he'll be playing and the area of the team he'll be playing. But they went on to add defenseman Clayton Stoner coming over from the Minnesota Wild. The Wild wanted to re-sign Stoner, but ultimately could not retain him because they could not give the money that Stoner was looking for. But so the Ducks took action and signed him to a 4-year, $13 million contract. Maybe a little bit much for a player of his type, but it's still a good player going to the Ducks. He's 29 years of age, won't be 30 till February 19th. He's a very big defenseman, 6'4", 216 pounds, a left-handed shot. Former 3rd round, 79th overall pick by the Wild in 2004. But again, more of a shutdown type defenseman. He'll add depth and veteran and leadership to the blue line. He's a veteran guy, a class guy. He'll help out in the locker room. But he is coming off a pretty bad year defensively. Last year, he was a career low, -6. And through 63 games, he only had 1 goal, 4 assists and 5 points, 84 penalty minutes, and 48 shots on goal. The 48 shots on goal was actually a career high for him. But again, more of a shutdown defenseman than last year. He did not live up to his full potential. But the potential is still there, and maybe the change of scenery will help him to live up to his full potential, because he showed flashes of his true potential in the playoffs last year. He got better in the playoffs. Through 13 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, and he was a +2. He turned the plus-minus around. He had 26 penalty minutes and 13 shots on goal. So he turned it around in the playoffs and was one of their better defensive defensemen. And it was his performance in the playoffs that made him one of the better free agent shutdown defensemen out there. And he actually can skate pretty decently for his size. And he's not a fast skater, but he will definitely be an upgrade speed-wise from Brian Allen. Yes, he's not as big as Brian Allen because Allen's 6'5", but he'll make the Ducks blue line just a smidget faster because of the fact that he is 1 inch smaller, but still brings size. Good signing by the Ducks, though it may have been a little bit overpaid. And then the final addition that the Ducks made this offseason, maybe the most interesting addition of all, and maybe the one that will be the most looked at from the standpoint of from the standpoint of fans and the professional analyzers. The Ducks did go on. They took a low-risk signing at a 1-year, $1 million contract signing of left winger Danny Heatley, who like Clayton Stoner is coming over from the Minnesota Wild. It's a low-risk contract, so if he is a disappointment, it's not that big of a deal. But Heatley is 33 years of age. He'll be 34 on January 21st. So the age shows that he may be out of his prime and maybe doesn't have much left in the tank. He was the second overall pick in 2000 by the Atlanta Thrashers. Finally finished with that huge contract extension that the Ottawa Senators gave him all those years ago before he was dealt to the San Jose Sharks, and then ultimately the Sharks dealt him to the Minnesota Wild for Marty Havlat, a trade that actually ended up not working for both sides. Heatley was solid in his first year with the Wild, but the last couple of years with Minnesota he struggled, particularly last year. Last year was probably Heatley's worst season, not including the. Last year was Heatley's worst season in a year where he's played 71 or more games. That does not include the lockout Jordan year, and that does not include the 03-04 season when he missed most of the season recovering from a car crash. Through 76 games last year, 12 goals, 16 assists, 28 points, a -18, which is almost a career low. His career low came from his rookie season, but that -18 is still pretty bad. He did only have 18 penalty minutes, but he only had 110 shots on goal. That's the lowest shots on goal total in his career through 71 or more games. So he was really bad and inconsistent during the regular season. However, he did actually play well in the playoffs. It was his first real good postseason in a long time. So, not so much offensively, but defensively. He really turned it up in the playoffs. Through 11 games, he only had 1 goal, but he had 5 assists, 6 points, and he was a +6 in the playoffs with only 4 penalty minutes and 9 shots on goal. So he only had 1 goal and only 9 shots on goal, but defensively, it looked like he finally had bought in to the Wild system in the playoffs. He was a plus player, and he was acting as a real good veteran toward the younger players in Minnesota, en route to going to the second round and losing in 6 games to the Chicago Blackhawks. But he really came up huge in Game 7 against the Colorado Avalanche. It was one of the reasons why they won that game. So he was big in the playoffs, and that made him a little bit higher, a little bit better on the free agent market than maybe he should have been. But the Ducks have taken interest in what he could possibly bring. And for Danny Heatley, this is a prove himself kind of year. It's a low risk contract, and it's a year where he's coming to the Anaheim organization for the chance to prove that he still has a bit left in the tank. He's another guy who could be expected to help the Ducks on the power play. He's got a real big slap shot. That's one thing about him that hasn't changed. He's got one of the biggest shots in the league. So he could help them on the half wall. The German-born Canadian. He's played with Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry before in the Olympics, and a former Duck villain now becomes an ally and could have a chance to play left wing on the top line with Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry and get his career back in shape. So hopefully it works out, because if he does get himself back in shape, this is a guy who's among one of the better snipers in the league, and he'll really help out the Ducks. Ducks in the offensive department. He's definitely lost a lot of foot speed. Not the skater he used to be, but he's still real big, still real strong, still got that big shot, and is a guy who can maybe go to the front of the net and get goals that way. Which now takes us to some of the top questions for the Ducks this season. And probably the biggest question of all, How much will Ryan Kesler help close the gap between Anaheim and the Kings and even the Chicago Blackhawks? Well, he is an excellent player in the face-off circle, and when he's healthy, he's good for 10 to 15 power play goals and is also a short-handed threat. He has won the Selke Trophy and was a finalist 200 times, 2 other times, and he plays a 200-foot game. He's a guy who also wins a lot of face-offs, so he'll help them out in that department. This guy is going to be a real good player for the Ducks, and Ducks fans got to feel it. Is Anaheim's defense strong enough to make a deep playoff run? The short answer may be no, at the very least not in the way it's currently constructed. They don't have a true shutdown to pairing this year. They haven't had one since Sean O'Donnell left. And Francois Beauchemin, he's not a guy who can have the same kind of ice time that he used to have. He will probably play with Hampus Lindholm, and then, of course, you got Cam Fowler and Ben Lovejoy. They were good last year during the regular season, but they couldn't seize the moment against the Kings. Again, Clayton Stoner gives them size, but he's a second or third pair defenseman who won't put Anaheim over the top. He'll probably play with Sami Vatanen, and Brian Allen and Mark Fistrick will more likely than not be the seventh guys. But Sheldon Surrey, then you got a guy like Sheldon Surrey. Missing him all of last season could have been one of the reasons why their power play struggled. They really missed his big shot from the point. He helped their power play get better during the lockout shortened year after it was so bad during 2011-2012. But they missed him all of last year. He suffered a season-ending and potentially career-ending wrist injury in training camp, and it doesn't look like it's really progressed. So his career could be over as it is. His number 44 was already given to Nate Thompson, their trade acquisition from the Tampa Bay Lightning. So, sign that his career could be over. And even if he does come back, he's in the final year of his contract and will most likely play in the minors. So, don't expect to see Sheldon Surrey back in an Anaheim uniform at any time soon. How does the goaltending shake out? Frederik Andersen is probably the number one at the moment, and that could change in a heartbeat if second-year goaltender John Gibson has an outstanding training camp. But this would be his official rookie season after going undefeated during the regular season. They both were the reasons why Jonas Hiller's Anaheim career came to an end, and he signed with the Calgary Flames. And Jason LaBarbera is a veteran third guy who will add leadership. Who will play with Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry? Well, the short option might be Danny Heatley, and that would probably be the option to start the year. And if that doesn't work out, he could probably be a good fourth-line option. And Heatley is a left-handed shot, which they need. When Bobby Ryan played on that line, he was a right-handed shot, which made that line weak on the left wall, even though they were the best line in the league during the 2010-2011 season. They still had their weaknesses. Bobby Ryan, of course, now a member of the Ottawa Senators. Danny Heatley, though, is a left-handed shot, so he could help them out a bit. But even if he doesn't work, maybe a guy like Devontae Smith-Pelly, who played very well with them in the playoffs last year, could be an option. But they got to get Devontae Smith-Pelly signed first. He's still a restricted free agent. The Ducks did have a few of those this season, this offseason. Ricard Raquel, Jakob Silverberg was one of them. They managed to re-sign him. Sami Vatanen was another one. They re-signed him to a bridge deal. They still got to get Devontae Smith-Pelly signed, however. Signs point to that they will, because they already gave him a number change. He now wears number 12 rather than number 77. So we'll see how soon it will be until they actually do sign him. And can Anaheim translate regular season success into the playoffs? Meaning, if they get to the playoffs, can they be as successful in the playoffs as they are in the regular season? Bruce Boudreau, as a coach, has been a guy known for coaching great regular season teams, but never putting up the same kind of performances in the playoffs. And that was something going back to his tenure with the Washington Capitals. They won the President's Trophy in 2010 and got eliminated in the first round in 7 games by the Montreal Canadiens. So he's never been to the conference finals in his coaching career. That's something that's going to have to change if the Ducks are going to have a shot at winning a championship. And probably the big question that I have for the Ducks this offseason is, can they stay healthy? Last year, the Ducks were one of the many teams victimized by the injury bug, especially in the early going. They lost a lot of guys in training camp, and even when guys were getting healthy, they would just lose other players. They just could not stay completely healthy at all last season. It was a rough year for the Ducks as far as staying healthy. If they're going to be successful this year, they need to stay healthy. All their players need to stay healthy. They cannot get hurt. Hopefully that does not become a problem this season, because if it does, then the Ducks could be looking at a long, long season. They were very lucky to get by with the injuries the way they did, and it was because they had so much depth that they were able to. They still have a lot of depth too, which is why it may not affect them as much as a team like the Detroit Red Wings. But, injuries are never a good thing. So hopefully it all works out for the Ducks. As we now go ahead and take a look at their projected lineup if their team manages to stay completely healthy. For the top line, Ryan Getzlaf is going to center the top line, and obviously Corey Perry is his right winger. Who the left winger on that line is going to be, again, remains a mystery. Danny Heatley is the projected guy, but this projected projected lineup lists Devontae Smith-Pelly as maybe the primary option to play on that line. He's a right-handed shot, but he played real well with those two when he got promoted to that line. He's an NHL-ready player. Again, he still needs to be signed. The Ducks will get him signed, probably to a bridge deal, just to see how he does this year. He was their second-round pick back in 2010, 42nd overall. Didn't really do much during the regular season when he played, but made a huge impact in the playoffs. Through 19 regular season games, only 2 goals and 8 assists for 10 points, but he was a +5. Only 1 penalty taken, and he had 23 shots on goal. But in the playoffs, through 12 games, 5 goals. 5 goals, which made him a mainstay on the roster. He didn't have any assists, and he was a -1, but he only had 24 penalty minutes, and he had 26 shots on goal. He came up clutch, particularly in Game 6 against the Dallas Stars. He had 2 goals in that game, including the game-tying goal. So, this is a guy who could go on to be a real clutch player for the Ducks in the future. Second line, Ryan Kesler is obviously going to center that second line, adding one of the best 1-2 punches in the league with Ryan Getzlaf and Ryan Kesler, the 2 Ryans on the team. Kyle Palmieri is expected to be his right winger, and Patrick Maroon is expected to be his left winger, at least to start. Patrick Maroon is another guy who got a number change from 62 to 19, which means he has officially solidified his place. We all know what Ryan Kesler can do when playing at his best. Patrick Maroon last year was, as a 25-year-old, was just brilliant. He's 26 now. He really showed flashes last year. Through 62 games, 11 goals, 18 assists, 29 points, +11, 101 penalty minutes, and 93 shots on goal. And in the playoffs, 13 games played, 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points, -2, 38 penalty minutes, and 21 shots on goal. He, I believe, was also given a contract extension at one point in the year. And this could be another Dustin Penner type player. He is a very similar player to Dustin Penner in the sense that he brings grit and also a knack for the net. He is going to be the next Dustin Penner, but signs point to him maybe potentially being more consistent than Dustin Penner. He definitely fills what the Ducks are looking for in their roster, and he's not afraid to drop the gloves if need be. He'll definitely add energy on that line. The big question on that line is Kyle Palmieri. Last year, kind of a setback year for Kyle Palmieri. He was scratched on a bunch of occasions. He played 71 games, which means he played most of the year. And he had 14 goals, 17 assists, 31 points, plus 9 rating, 38 penalty minutes, and 147 shots on goal. All career highs. However, many of people will tell you that he was much better during the lockout-shortened year. In the playoffs, he was scratched a bunch of times and therefore only played 9 games. He did have 3 goals, no assists, but he didn't have any assists, and he was a +1. But he didn't have any assists. He had 14 penalty minutes and only generated 12 shots on goal. So Kyle Palmieri is a guy who's going to look to be a little bit more consistent this year, so that he can potentially stay in the lineup. He has to be more consistent this year. He's 23, going on 24. He'll be 24 February 1st. If he can stay healthy this year, then the Ducks are going to be a real... If he can stay consistent this year, then it'll really help the Ducks a lot. If not, he'll just get demoted to maybe a bottom 6 forward and maybe even potentially be traded if, say, one of the younger players who's been highly touted and could be ready to play performs in the minors much better than Kyle Palmieri's performing in the majors. So we'll see how that works out. Hopefully Kessler can help him. Will help him out, and that's an all-American line right there. So that will definitely also make a big impact. Ryan Kessler from Michigan, Kyle Palmieri from New Jersey, and Patrick Maroon from St. Louis, Missouri. So that's a real good line to look at. Third line now. Rickard Rakell centering Jakob Silfverberg on the right and Andrew Cogliano on the left. There's no doubt that Rickard Rakell, the final pick of the first round in 2011, 30th overall, 21 years of age now, native of Sundbyberg, Sweden. There's no doubt that he is ready to play in the National Hockey League this year. He showed flashes of how good he can be in the playoffs. During the regular season, he struggled. Through 18 games, he only had 4 assists and no goals, and he was a -3 with only 22 shots on goal. But he only had 1 penalty, which was good news. It was really in the playoffs where he showed his flashes of what we're going to expect out of him in his career. He only played 4 games, but in those 4 games had a goal and an assist, was a -2. He didn't have any penalty minutes, and he only generated 2 shots on goal, but he was, he did some other things for the Ducks that really made them look like a better team. So he could very much be ready to take a role on the team this year. He's a center. He can play both center and right wing. He may be better suited for a center role this season. But he's going to have to improve in his ability to win faceoffs. That's something he'll work on in training camp because they may need him to be their third-line center. If that doesn't work out, then Andrew Cogliano can probably move to center. He had played left wing the last couple of years. After his first season in Anaheim, playing center didn't go so well. He was moved to left wing, playing on a line with Saku Koivu and Daniel Winnick, and he really thrived playing left wing. Last year was Andrew Cogliano's best year. A career-high 21 goals, and he had 21 assists, 42 points, 3 points shy of his career high point-wise from his rookie year. But he was a +13, 26 penalty minutes, and a career-high 157 shots on goal. And in the playoffs through 13 games, 1 goal, 6 assists, and 7 points. He was a -2, but he only had 8 penalty minutes, and he had 17 shots on goal. This guy has really become a valuable player for the Ducks. So valuable that they signed him to a 3-year contract extension during the season. His contract would have ran out at the end of this year, but after being a very inconsistent player as an Edmonton Oiler and not playing so well in his first year with the Ducks, the last 2 years with the Ducks, he was so good. And he was only better this year. He is proving himself to be one of the more valuable bottom 6 forwards, not just on the Ducks, but in the National Hockey League. He is a solidified third liner, so he's just really a bona fide player. He is just becoming a complete player. He may not live up to his 25th overall status from 2005, But he's now in the prime of his career at 27 years of age and is establishing himself as the best, maybe the best third liner in the NHL. One thing that can't be denied as well is his speed. One of the fastest players in the National Hockey League. And he's only 5'10", 181 pounds. And the other unique thing about him is that he's never missed a game since joining the National Hockey League in 2007. He has been completely healthy his entire career. He never misses a shift, and he never misses a game. Hopefully that trend will continue for the Ducks this year. He was the only player on the Ducks that played all 82 games last year, if I'm correct. So the Ducks will need him to stay healthy. The big question on this line is Jakob Silfverberg. They re-signed him to a one-year deal worth $850,000. He's 23 years of age. He'll be 24 on October 13th. He was the centerpiece. He was the Ducks' centerpiece acquisition in the Bobby Ryan trade, and he had a great start when he came over, but then he got hurt, missed a good chunk of time, and when he came back, he did not play as well. Through 52 games last year, he finished the year with 10 goals, 13 assists, 23 points. The assists and points are career highs, +2. 12 penalty minutes for the second straight year, and 119 shots on goal. And through 13 playoff games, he was not very good in the playoffs either. Only 2 goals, no assists, -3 rating. He only had 4 penalty minutes, which is good news, but he only had 17 shots on goal. Jakob Silfverberg, this is a player that they're really going to be looking to have a better season this year. You can talk about Danny Heatley all you want and how he needs to have a better year, and you could also talk about a guy like Kyle Palmieri, but Jakob Silfverberg really is the guy to look at to have a better year, because even though he's also on a one-year deal like Heatley, the difference is that he will be a restricted free agent again at the end of the year. He's not eligible to be a UFA till he's 27. So if the Ducks are going to qualify him again, he's going to be looking to stay qualified and stay with the Ducks. He's going to definitely need to have a better year, because this is a guy with top 6 potential. He has the potential to be a top 6 forward in this league, but it's not going to happen overnight. Now, last year he did spend a large chunk of the season playing left wing. He was on the second line at points, but when he was on the second line, playing with Matthew Perreault and Teemu Selanne, he was playing the left wing side, which wasn't very comfortable for him. He's a natural right winger, and he's a right-handed shot. So moving back to the right wing full time, now with Teemu Selanne gone, should hopefully help him get himself back into good playing form and becoming the super Swede that the Ducks expect him to become. But it's also going to be up to him and his ability to put up consistent numbers. And then the projected fourth line, Nate Thompson centering Danny Heatley on the right and Matt Bolesky on the left, with Tim Jackman as the 13th forward. Again, Danny Heatley, him being on this line is questionable because he may play on the top line at left wing with Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry, at least to begin the year. But if that doesn't work out, then yeah, he'll be a good fourth line option and help them out defensively. And should help them out a little bit defensively, because he definitely improved his defensive play during the playoffs. Nate Thompson centering this fourth line is a great option, and Matt Bolesky, he is another guy who's played on the top line with Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry in the past. He's added physicality on that line. He was so good playing on that line with them during the playoffs, especially in the second round series against the Los Angeles Kings. So it's very possible Matt Bolesky moves up there at some point, but when it happens remains to be seen. On Tim Jackman, he was re-signed to a one-year extension during the season. He is pretty much the 13th forward. Skates really well for his size and the fact that he's a fourth liner. He's 32. He'll be 33 on November 14th. He played a significant role in the little opportunity he got for the Ducks last year when they got him from the Calgary Flames. They like him. Bruce Boudreau likes him. They like the energy he brings. And he actually could be one of the more interesting 13th forwards in the league because it's possible at some point that he does break into the lineup full time and help them go on a deep playoff run when they need fourth liners and they need to be a little more physical. He could help them against the Los Angeles Kings. I think the fact that he didn't play was another reason why they maybe lost that series. But another player you really have to consider as well is Emerson Edom. He's one of the forwards also in the mix, as is another Swedish center, William Karlsson. But he may not be ready to play just yet. He's probably a project a couple of years in the making. Emerson Edom, he's another guy who actually got a number change. He was 65 the last couple of years. He's now number 16 as proof that he could actually be a solidified player in this lineup. You know, he actually could probably take Rickard Rakell's place in the lineup because Raquel may not even be ready yet. He may need another year to develop his overall game, in which case Andrew Cogliano would probably move back to center and Emerson Edom would probably play the left wing side. But Emerson Edom is a guy who brings a lot of speed. He was a little inconsistent last year after really playing well during his rookie year in the lockout shortened season, and so he didn't play the full season last year. He did better his offensive statistics. He had 7 goals, 4 assists, 11 points, was a +3, only 4 penalty minutes, and 44 shots on goal through 29 games. But he played 4 games in the playoffs and didn't have any points. He was an even plus-minus rating. He had 12 penalty minutes, and he had 9 shots on goal. He did more harm for them than good in the playoffs last year after being so dominant during the 2013 playoffs. Hopefully, going back to the Norfolk Admirals of the American Hockey League for that amount of time that he went down for will help him. He was very good for the Admirals during the regular season. He was their best player, and he could be ready to play full-time this year at long last. He's now 22 years of age, so he should be a big help for the team. I think he definitely will play. That's my personal opinion. So, regardless of who plays, though, there's no doubt that this offense, now with Ryan Kessler and added, and maybe even Danny Heatley to a lesser extent, if he can get his career back in shape, there's no doubt that the mix of depth and the mix of youngsters, depth, and veterans will help this Duck offense. It's one of the best offenses in the National Hockey League. There's no doubt about it. They were the best team in goals for percentage last year, which means their offense could be among the best in the league once again. This is the team's biggest strong side. Defense, the defense, I think it's an okay defense, personally. It's definitely a better defense this year than it was last year, or at the very least, the expectations for this defense group are much higher now. Cam Fowler and Ben Lovejoy really came together last year and became the top pair for the Ducks, and they'll be expected to do so again. Cam Fowler last year finally lived up to the hype that was thrown upon him when he got drafted 12th overall in 2010. He's 22 years old, won't be 23 till December 5th. Last year was Cam Fowler's best year without a doubt. Maybe not offensively, but defensively for sure. Through 70 games last year, 6 goals, 30 assists, 36 points, but it was a +15 rating with only 14 penalty minutes and 100 shots on goal. And in the playoffs, he didn't have any goals, and he only had 4 assists, but he was a +2 with 4 penalty minutes only and 20 shots on goal. This is a guy who will put expectations on himself to increase his offensive output while maintaining his good defensive output. This is a guy who's expected to become a real solid two-way defenseman and eventually become a top 2 defenseman in this league along the level of guys like Drew Doughty, Shea Weber, Erik Karlsson, and Duncan Keith. He may not ever be as good as any of those guys, but he'll definitely be all the better. He'll definitely be better than Mark-Edward Vlasic if he comes up to live up to his expectations. He'll definitely be better than Marc-Edouard Vlasic, and he'll be a better defensive defenseman than Erik Karlsson, and he may even become a better player than Brent Seabrook. But, and Ryan Suter as well. Cam Fowler definitely has the talent, great speed, great puck handling, a defenseman who plays in the analytics department, possesses the puck well, and tries to model his game after Scott Niedermayer. He'll never be as good as Scott Niedermayer, we know that, but he'll definitely be better than Francois Beauchemin in his future. He has a bright future ahead of him with this organization. And Ben Lovejoy, how about this guy? One of the most underrated players, not just on the Ducks, but in the league. Not just with the way he plays, but with his leadership. He's the undrafted Concord, New Hampshire native, is now 30 years of age, will be 31 on February 20th. 6'2", 205 pounds, right-handed shot, not afraid to speak his mind. He is one of those defensemen who's not afraid to speak his mind. And last year was a career year for Ben Lovejoy through 78 games, 5 goals, 13 assists, 18 points, a plus 21, 39 penalty minutes, and 107 shots on goal. Everything but the penalty minutes and assists were career highs. And in the playoffs, through 13 games, he had 2 goals, was a plus 1, 8 penalty minutes, and 13 shots on goal. But again, for him, it's not about the numbers. It's about his plus-minus, because he's more of a shutdown defenseman. When he first came to the Ducks during the lockout-shortened season, the original intention was to bring him over as an emergency player because their defense was crippled, was injured. Cam Fowler had gotten hurt. And the original expectation was that they were going to acquire him from the Pittsburgh Penguins, and then when Cam Fowler came back and Sheldon Surrey came back, that he was going to become the 7th defenseman. But when he came over, he just played so well for the Ducks that they just couldn't scratch him. He did not allow them to scratch him. He really became a force for the Ducks. And now, if I'm the Pittsburgh Penguins, I'm kicking myself in the foot for getting rid of this guy, because he had just lived up to his full potential last year. It was a breakout year for him, and he's now a key player for the Ducks and a top 4 defenseman. Again, maybe overrated in the sense that he is playing in the top 2 when he's really more of a top 4 or top 6 guy, but he really is only playing there because of his chemistry with Cam Fowler. That is the reason why, and this may be the best among any player, maybe the best top 4 or top 6 defenseman playing in a top 2 role, considering the situation. On the second pair, you have Francois Beauchemin and Sami Vatanen projected to play together. Beauchemin played with Hampus Lindholm last year, but Vatanen is meant for a top 4 role and could eventually be playing a top 2 role. Francois Beauchemin, he's getting on in his years, and he's nowhere near the same player he used to be. He's 34 years of age now. Last year, though, he played well. Through 70 games, 4 goals, 13 assists, 17 points. He was a plus 26, 39 penalty minutes, and 100 shots on goal. So he played well during the regular season, but in the playoffs, he did struggle. Through 13 games, he didn't have any goals. He only had 4 assists, but he was a minus 4, only 2 penalty minutes, and 15 shots on goal. So he did struggle a bit in the playoffs, but one of his best attributes is his ability to make a big hit at center ice. His neutral ice hits are one of the best in the league. So this is a valuable player for the Ducks. I believe he's in the final year of his contract, so regardless of how well he plays, this could be Francois Beauchemin's last year as a Duck, just because of all the youngsters on the blue line that are coming up behind him that could become major role players for this team. So Beauchemin is going to be looking to have a big year, and he'll help a guy like Sami Vatanen become an even better player. The Ducks were much better when he was in the lineup. He's 23 years of age. He's one of the big steals coming out of the 4th round in 2009. He's only 5'10", 183 pounds, but he plays bigger than his size. He played 48 games last year and had 6 goals, 15 assists, and 21 points. He was a plus 9, had 22 penalty minutes and 73 shots on goal. And in the playoffs, he played 5 games, had 1 assist, -2, and 10 shots on goal. So he maybe wasn't as good in the playoffs just because he maybe wasn't ready for a full-time playoff role. But last year, during the regular season, he really showed flashes of what the Ducks are going to expect out of him. And this is a guy who could become a much better two-way defenseman than what he looks like now. He is going to be a real good player, and playing in a top 4 role is only going to make both him and the Ducks better. He was a surprise addition to Team Finland of the Olympics last year, and he led all Finnish blue liners with 5 assists through 6 games. He didn't have any goals, but he was an assist machine during those playoffs, and he was a +3, and he had 6 shots on goal while not taking any penalties. So this right-handed shooting, and he's a right-handed shooting defenseman with a big shot for his size, so that makes it all the better. The big questions on the Ducks defense really come on the third pair with Hampus Lindholm and Clayton Stoner, because now they have 2 left-handed shooting defensemen. Clayton Stoner could be the guy playing the offside side. Again, he's a veteran. He'll add some wisdom and experience to a young Hampus Lindholm. We mentioned Clayton Stoner earlier and how he had an off year last year during the regular season, but picked it up in the playoffs. And the change of scenery could help him live up to his full potential. Hampus Lindholm, on the other hand, last year was really one of the upstart rookies in the National Hockey League last year. He's only 20 years of age. He'll be 21 January 20th. He was the 6th overall pick in 2012, picked much higher than anybody could have anticipated him to be selected. Nobody expected the Ducks to take him at 6th overall. But he's 6'3", 197 pounds, a left-handed shot. He was the best conditioned player in that whole draft. On the cycle, had the best cycling time of the entire draft, barely better than Ryan Murray. And last year as a rookie, he was just great. Through 78 games, 6 goals, 24 assists, 30 points. But he was a +29 rating, 36 penalty minutes, and 116 shots on goal. He was fantastic during the regular season and was one of their most consistent players during the regular season. He always was originally more of a shutdown defenseman at the beginning of his career, but he's really increased his offensive play, and it's only going to get better. The playoffs, however, he did struggle. He did play 11 games, but he only had 2 assists, no goals, and he was a -2 with only 6 shots on goal, which is why he was scratched for 2 games of the playoffs. But that was just a learning experience for Lindholm. He became human during the playoffs, and that's common for a rookie. He'll be expected to come into this year, hopefully not go through a sophomore jinx, and really help out this team. The Ducks have a lot of rookies this year, and a lot of rookies from last year, I should say, and they're all hoping they don't suffer from the sophomore jinx. The Ducks have a lot of players who need to avoid that, and hopefully that is the case, because if that's not the case, then the Ducks could be in for some trouble this season. And then the Ducks also, in a technical sense, have a 4th D pair of 2 defensemen who will be the 7th and 8th guys, Brian Allen and Mark Fistrick. Brian Allen, after 2 years with the Ducks wearing number 55, went back to his natural number 5 that Lucas Spiza left behind when he got traded. Brian Allen is going to go into training camp, and he will look to kick someone out of the defense of the top 6. He wants to prove at 34 years of age that he could still be that at 6'5", 224 pounds, he could still be a top 6 player. He didn't have it because last year during the regular season he was actually pretty good through 68 games. He didn't have any goals and he only had 10 assists. But again, he's a shutdown defenseman. But he was a +20, had 75 penalty minutes and 60 shots on goal. In the playoffs, however, last year he struggled. Through 13 games, he only had 1 goal. His first goal as a Duck finally came in the playoffs, but he was a -4 28 penalty minutes and 9 shots on goal. Not to mention, he was the guy that cost the Ducks game number 1 of against the Los Angeles Kings. Because if the Ducks win that game, if they didn't blow that game, they win that series. That was really the game that lost them that series, in my personal opinion. Brian Allen is is really the big player to blame, which is why he's really more of a 7th guy now. And then you got Mark Fistrick, who, with the little opportunity he had last year, really made the most of it. So, kind of similar to Francois Beauchemin in the sense that he's a physical force, a shutdown defenseman who likes to stand you up at the neutral zone. He did a lot of that last year, so he's a guy he was signed to a 3-year contract extension during the season. He filled a spot on the blue line when they had a lot of injuries, and he played really well. So having him around will also help. And as I mentioned, Sheldon Soure's career is in serious doubt because of the injury that caused him to miss the entire season last year. They also have Jesse Blacker and Shea Theodore on the blue line, who will also battle in training camp for spots on the defense, for spots on defense. The real big concern their defense is okay. Their forward group is definitely the biggest upside of their team, and the defense is, solid. It's not the best defense group in the NHL, but it's definitely solid and could get better over time. As long as Francois Beauchemin isn't logging the kind of minutes that he's used to logging over the course of a full season, it now may be Cam Fowler's turn to log those kind of minutes. Same with Ben Lovejoy. But the real big concern for the Ducks this season is in goal, because they have 2 young goaltenders in John Gibson and Frederik Andersen. This has John Gibson projected to be the starter with Frederik Andersen as his backup and Jason LaBarbera as the 3rd guy. But when it really comes down to it, Frederik Andersen may end up being the number 1 at the beginning of the season just because of how well he played last year. He is coming off an injury, though, so hopefully he can keep himself, in shape. He's a bigger goaltender than John Gibson, but we all know about the expectations for John Gibson. He will be the starter for this club in the future. What that means for Frederik Andersen's future, obviously, is in question. And hey, you never know. John Gibson could end up being a disappointment, and Frederik Andersen could end up being the guy to lead them to the promised land in the future. We'll see. But Jason LaBarbera will add wisdom and experience to that young group, and will take one of those spots if one of them doesn't play well or one of them gets hurt. But it's a young goaltending tandem. Definitely the youngest goaltending tandem in the National Hockey League. But the goaltending is a big question just because of how young and how unproven these 2 guys are. The expectation is that they're going to do just fine, but for now, it's still something in question. Hopefully it works out. They're going to need their goaltenders to be good in order to be, if they're going to be successful. Hopefully Frederik Andersen doesn't go through a sophomore jinx, and hopefully John Gibson can pick up where he left off during the regular season last year. As we now go ahead and take a look at the Ducks' top 10 prospects. For the Anaheim Ducks, when we look at this prospect pool, there is no doubt about it that John Gibson is their number 1 guy. This could be the final year of him being a prospect, though. It is the Americans that really dominate this Ducks' top 10 prospects. They have a lot of Swedes as well, but the Ducks' top 3 players are Americans. John Gibson from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Nicholas Kurdilis from, born in Louisville, Texas. Spent part of his life in France, but then came back and spent the rest of his life in Orange County, California. And then Stefan Nason, a native of Plano, Texas. They're the top 3 guys, and well-deserved. Ricard Raquel is number 4. He could be ready to play in the NHL this year. Both he and John Gibson will battle for spots. Nick Ritchie Number 5, he was their 10th overall pick this past year, which made the 24th overall pick expendable in the Ryan Kessler deal. The Canucks obviously went on to take Jared McCann with that pick. Nick Ritchie last year for the Peterborough Petes of the Ontario Hockey League played 61 games and had 39 goals, 35 assists, and 74 points. He's 18 years of age, 6'2", 226 pounds. Obviously, the younger brother of Dallas Stars number 1 prospect Brett Ritchie. And though he's not projected to make the roster till 2015-16, he, believe it or not, is going to be in training camp with the team this year and could be a top candidate from this year's draft to play as an 18-year-old. It's very shocking considering that he still has a lot of work he still needs a lot of work defensively, but still, the fact that he's going to battle for a spot as an 18-year-old is very mind-boggling. Shea Theodore, their first-round 26th overall pick from 2013, the leading scoring defenseman of the Western Hockey League last year for the Seattle Thunderbirds. Still improving on his defensive play, but he's going to be in the NHL very soon. He'll begin his pro career. This year. Nick Sorensen, the Danish-born Swede, is number 7. William Karlsson, number 8. Miro Aaltonen, number 5. And number 9, I should say. He could end up being the big 6th-round steal of 2013. And Igor Bobkov, another goaltender, Russian goaltender, at number 10. He's been in the system a while, though, and he played in the East Coast Hockey League last year. So overall, with this top 10 prospect pool, this is one of the deepest prospect pools once again in the division. They were just barely the deepest prospect pool in the Pacific Division last year, and one of the deepest prospect pools in the league, if not the deepest prospect pool in the league. And it's very possible that they are in that position again. They are in a deep battle. I mean, it's definitely between, like last year, it is between them and the Calgary Flames. But ultimately, I would have to say the Ducks again, only for this reason, because their prospects are much more well-known than the Flames prospects. I mean, yeah, when you look at the Calgary Flames top 10 pool, when you look at the Flames top 10 prospect pool, they have some really important names, including Sam Bennett, the 4th overall pick from this past year, and Johnny Gaudreau. That is a great one, too. Marcus Granlund, number 3. Mark Jankowski, Emile Poirier, Yoni Ortio, Morgan Klimchuk, Michael Furland, Patrick Seeloff, and John Gillies. So it's pretty equal when it really comes down to it. But the Ducks probably maybe just a smidge better just because their players are a lot more versatile. They have a lot better players position-wise. And they have more guys that are ready to play this year. For the Calgary Flames, they only have one player ready to play for this year, and that is their number 2 prospect, left winger Johnny Gaudreau. Whereas the Ducks, they have John Gibson and Rickard Rakell, and maybe even possibly Nick Ritchie. He may be more NHL ready than Sam Bennett, and Bennett was their top prospect and the 4th overall pick, where Ritchie was the 10th overall pick. But Ritchie may be ready to play this year, and Shea Theodore is even going to go to camp. So I'd say, just from that perspective, and the fact that they have their number 10 prospect is another good goaltender in Igor Bobkov, I'd say from that perspective, the Ducks' top 10 prospect pool once again just barely beats out the Flames for the top prospect pool in the Pacific Division and among the top prospect pools in the league. Better than the Calgary Flames, better than the Arizona Coyotes, better than the Vancouver Canucks, better than the Los Angeles Kings, better than the San Jose Sharks, and better than the Edmonton Oilers. They're the best prospect pool in the division once again. But of all these top 10 guys, this is actually a really hard decision to make as far as what their top prospect could be. in my opinion. I mean, there's no denying John Gibson. This guy is going to be a flat-out superstar, and he'll be the next great goaltender for representing USA hockey. He's 21 years of age, and he'll be expected to live up to the hype at 6'3", 210 pounds. Last year, through 45 games played with the Norfolk Admirals of the American Hockey League, 21 wins, 17 losses, 4 OT losses, 234 goals against, 919 save percentage, and 5 shutouts. And he was the second-round, 39th overall pick in 2011. He wasn't the first goaltender picked in that draft, but he was the top-ranked goaltender of that draft. Which makes you wonder why the Nashville Predators took Magnus Hellberg over him one pick before. But still, this guy's going to be an absolute stud. However, when I really look at this prospect pool, the prospect to me that really catches my interest the most would probably have to be their number 2 prospect, left winger Nicholas Kurdelis. Nicholas Kurdelis was the second round, 36th overall pick in 2012, but since being drafted, this kid has done nothing but impress, and impress some more. Through 28 games last year, 15 goals, 23 assists, and 38 points for the University of Wisconsin of the Big Ten Division. He's now 21 years of age, 6'1", 200 pounds. He signed with the Ducks in April, and he'll go play a full season for the Norfolk Admirals of the American Hockey League this season. He played 16 combined regular season and playoff games late last year for Norfolk, and this guy is just a guy who does a little bit of everything. He's a power forward / sniper, can put up great offensive numbers, can also play the game defensively, and with the Admirals last year through 6 regular season games, 1 goal, 3 assists, and 4 points, plus 3, 2 penalty minutes. So he was so good, and in the playoffs, through 10 games, 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points, only 2 penalty minutes, and 24 shots on goal, though he was a -4. He also represented the United States at the 2014 World Junior Championships, and through 5 games was one of their best players. 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points, a +2, 4 penalty minutes. This guy was just so spectacular for Team USA. He was one of their better players in that tournament. He was an assist-a-game guy, and he really came up huge. This is a guy who's going to come up huge. He could end up being a star in this league, or at the very least, a very good top 6 forward. He's a left winger, but he can also play center. But he may be better suited for the left wing. Yeah, he may be better suited for the left wing, but he could also play center. Again, born in Louisville, Texas, spent part of his life in France, but then came back to the U.S. and spent the rest of his life in Orange County, California. So, a representative of California hockey, which just continues to grow and grow and grow as each year passes. Hockey in California is rising, and this kid is no exception. Again, he may not be a main roster player until 2015, 2016 as a 21-year-old. However, he will go into training camp this year and have the chance to battle for a roster spot, and a good performance could go all the way for a player like him. So that is why, yes, there's no denying a guy like John Gibson. There really isn't. He's just going to be a stud. But Nicholas Kurdelis, however you want to say it, is my top prospect for the Anaheim Ducks this season. Now, the player on the Anaheim Ducks who needs to be better this season in order for the Ducks to take it up to the next level. Now, obviously for the Ducks, there are a lot of players you can choose from. Danny Heatley is one of them, and Kyle Palmieri is actually one of them as well. You can go to guys like Francois Beauchemin. You can go to a guy like Francois Beauchemin as well. Maybe even Ricard Raquel to some extent. There's a lot of options to choose from when it comes to these players. Matt Bolesky would not be one of the options. I mean, he was really good last year. 55 games played, 9 goals, 15 assists, 24 points. The 15 assists and 24 points were career highs, plus 8, which is a career high. 64 penalty minutes, 112 shots on goal, and through 5 playoff games, 2 goals, 2 assists, and 4 points. Even plus minus, 8 penalty minutes and 13 shots on goal. And though he didn't play that many playoff games, in the playoff games he did play, played really well on the line with Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry. Losing him in the playoffs was another reason why they lost that series. They missed his grit. He's not one of the players who needs to be better for any of those who were speculating that he was the guy. But I know the guy who needs to be better for the Ducks. It was actually a rather easy decision for me. The player on this Anaheim Ducks squad who needs to be better this season in order for the Ducks to take it to another level, without a doubt, has to be forward Jakob Silfverberg. And why Jakob Silfverberg instead of Heatley or Raquel or Palmieri or Beauchemin or one of the goaltenders? You could go back to the goaltenders as well. Well, let's think about it. Jakob Silfverberg, as I said earlier in this video, was the centerpiece of the Bobby Ryan trade going the Ducks' way. Now, one could argue that he struggled last year because of the fact that he spent a good amount of time on the left wing side when he was naturally a right winger. He's going to be a right winger for the entire season this year, or at least he's expected to be. But last year, in the time he got when he was healthy, 52 games played, 10 goals, 13 assists, 23 points, plus 2, 12 penalty minutes, 119 shots on goal, and through 13 playoff games, 2 goals, no assists, minus 3, 4 penalty minutes, and 17 shots on goal. He was, he had a great start to the year. At the beginning of the year, he was on a point streak at the beginning of the year. He had 5 points in his first 4 games and 6 points in his first 6 games. He was a point-a-game player until he got hurt. October 25th against the Ottawa Senators. He came back, had a goal in his first game back, but then struggled after that. And he struggled so much that he was even a healthy scratch at a lot of points in the season because he wasn't playing well. I don't believe he even played the Stadium Series game. No, he did not play the Stadium Series game because of how poorly and inconsistently he was playing. And in the playoffs, he really didn't do much of anything. He was re-signed to a 1-year deal, a bridge deal, $850,000. Obviously a low-risk bridge deal. But when you're the centerpiece of a big trade and trading away a big player like Bobby Ryan, you have to be good. And Jakob Silfverberg, a former second-round pick back in 2009 by the Ottawa Senators, picked 39th overall. He's expected to be a super Swede. A native of Gavle, Sweden, was one of the bigger players for Brynäs IF in the Swedish league. Really came up and had the makings of a superstar when he was with the Ottawa Senators. Now he's with the Ducks, and his first season as a Duck was great in the beginning, but didn't go so well after that. If the Ducks are going to take it to the next level this season, Jakob Silfverberg has to be better this year. He needs to be more consistent. He needs to show Bruce Boudreau and Bob Murray that he deserves to be on this team and that he can stay in the lineup. Because this is eventually supposed to, or from what a lot of the analyzers were saying, what the experts have said, that Jakob Silfverberg is supposed to be the bona fide second-line right winger behind Corey Perry and add a great 1-2 punch on that second line. Right now they have Kyle Palmieri playing that second line, and he has the potential to be a top 6 forward too, but at this point in his career, considering the fact that he was scratched a couple times last season, he may be better suited starting the year on the third line, and he has to play the second line with Ryan Kessler and Patrick Maroon. He may even be scratched again at some point because they also have Emerson Edom, who is definitely ready to come in and be a mainstay on the team. You know, even though he's not on the projected roster, he is going to come in and be a regular on this team. And maybe he would have been the player that I would have said needed to be better, but he wasn't on the main roster, so I couldn't say him. So Jakob Silfverberg is really the next best option. You know, he is supposed to be a major super Swede. So in order for the Ducks to be a better team this year, Jakob Silfverberg is the guy that has to be better for the Ducks this season in order for them to get to the next level and go farther in the playoffs. Overall, are the Ducks a playoff team? Absolutely. There's no question about it. They won the division last year, and though they may not have the same amount of points, shots on goal output, or even the same amount of goals scored as last year, they are expected to be a really good, well-rounded team, and they are going to be a playoff team, whether they win the division or not. Are they going to win the division again? That's obviously a big question. Maybe so. Maybe they could, but then again, they may not. Because you got to look at a team like the Los Angeles Kings and got to figure that they're due, with all these cup runs, they're due for a division title at some point soon. But as far as the Anaheim Ducks are concerned, why they are a playoff team, just look at their team overall. All that depth that they possess, the perfect mix of youth, leadership, veterans, and depth. I mean, it's crazy. And grit as well. They are going to be a really hard team to play against. Their forward core is just absolutely stacked. They're one of the best, if not the best, forward cores in the league. Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry are going to be back. They're going to be in top form again. Always two of the best players in the NHL. And their defense, even though it's not the best defense in the league, it's definitely significantly improved from last season. The addition of Clayton Stoner, it doesn't put him over the top, but it's a better option. It's a better sixth option on the blue line than Brian Allen, although Clayton Stoner definitely was overpaid. And even two of these guys don't fare well, they still got Brian Allen and Mark Fistrick who could take spots. Yes, there is concern in goal. Again, it's the youngest goaltending tandem in the National Hockey League with John Gibson and Frederik Andersen this year. But when it really comes down to it, the forwards are going to help that goaltending be better. That was the case when Bruce Boudreau coached the Washington Capitals. Their goaltending was never great, but their ability to score made up for it. It made their goaltending look better, much, much better than it really was. That may have to be the case for the Ducks this year if Gibson and Anderson don't solidify the goaltending position and don't play to their best abilities. But yes, that forward core is so good. That forward core pretty much is the embodiment of the team, and their depth, even on the blue line, makes them one of the most formidable forces in the league. And not only are they a playoff team, but they very well could be a cup contender this year. Will they win the cup? That remains to be seen. It's very hard to... It's going to be a big challenge. The Ducks will have to go through teams like the Los Angeles Kings and the Chicago Blackhawks, and maybe to an even lesser extent than that, the St. Louis Blues, because they're a significantly improved team this year, and they too could be a cup contender this year as well. So the Ducks are going to have to get through those 2, maybe 3 teams. always got to watch out for the San Jose Sharks. Even though I did say in my last video that they weren't going to make the playoffs, I also said it's very possible that they could, and they still have one of the best forward cores in the NHL as well. The Ducks always struggle when they play the San Jose Sharks also, so that's another thing. They'll look to be better within their own division this year. I mean, they were very good against their own division. They outplayed the Kings, they outplayed the Coyotes, they outplayed the Canucks, and they outplayed the Flames as well. They did win the season series with the Edmonton Oilers, but only because the Oilers had less home games. The Ducks actually struggled against the Oilers from a relative standpoint. They did lose the season series to the San Jose Sharks. That was the only divisional opponent they lost the season series to, but also because the Sharks had more home games. When you look at it this year, the Ducks are built, they're stacked, and they have a team that's built to win a Stanley Cup. It's now all about staying consistent, not just in the regular season, but in the playoffs as well. They're going to have to be good in the playoffs when they get there, because this is a cup contender. They just have to get to the next level, and they have to do it now. The door has opened for the Anaheim Ducks. The door has opened, and it's going to be open for the next couple of years now that they have Ryan Kesler on board. And one thing I forgot to mention about Ryan Kesler is the years on his contract remaining while the Ducks have him. He has 2 years remaining, but it's only $5 million a year, which is very, very cheap and very, very affordable for a player of his caliber. And the Ducks still have so much cap room left. They have among the most cap room in the National Hockey League, despite everything that they've done. Now, obviously, they still got to re-sign Devontae Smith-Pelly, but that's something that's going to get done, and it's going to get done soon. But, you know, this Ducks forward group, even the forwards and defensemen, their forwards are stacked, their defense is really depth-heavy, and it's going to be better than last year. Their goaltending is obviously a question mark, but their forwards and defensemen should have enough to make up for it. So, the Ducks are going to be a cup contender this year, but again, it's just all about taking it to the next level once they get to the playoffs, matching what they did in the regular season to what they should be doing in the playoffs. So, yes, the Anaheim Ducks have a shot to win the division again and go farther in the playoffs, and now have the tools to compete with some of the other center depth in the National Hockey League, like the Los Angeles Kings, like the San Jose Sharks, like the St. Louis Blues, and like the Dallas Stars, like the Chicago Blackhawks to a lesser extent. They now have Brad Richards. And if you want to maybe go east a little bit, the Pittsburgh Penguins, you know, teams like the Pittsburgh Penguins, you know. They have the center depth now with Ryan Kesler on board, their first significant second-line center since Andy McDonald. Their search has finally come to an end, at least for now. Ryan Kesler is going to be good for them. Obviously, Ryan Getzlaf and Corey Perry are going to be back. Cam Fowler is going to improve this year, and the youngsters are only going to get better. The kind of year that Danny Heatley is going to have, obviously, is in question, but their team is not going to fully rely on him. So, whether they win the division or not, whether they get farther in the playoffs or not, yes, the Anaheim Ducks are a playoff team this season. And that will do it for episode 162 of Hockey on the Spot. And that'll do it for the Pacific Division, the Western Conference, and more importantly, the NHL's 30 teams in 30 days. We are done. We have gotten through all the teams. The Anaheim Ducks were the last team. There was going to be one last video, however, regarding this topic, and that is all. And all that's going to be is a full team recap that video will be out tomorrow. So I will see you guys again tomorrow with one last video on the topic, and that will be a full 30 and 30 recap, where pretty much I'm not going to spend too much time. All I'll talk about is some of the late signings that I didn't get to talk about during the 30 and 30 segment because it was too late to talk about a signing from a specific team. And I'll also talk about any injury updates or updates with restricted free agents being re-signed and pro tryout contract invitees and what the teams could look like as a whole. So that'll be tomorrow. So be sure to join me again tomorrow when we officially conclude the 30 teams in 30 days with a full 30 and 30 recap. So until then, thank you guys so much for joining me this month as we talked about all these teams. I'm really excited for the season to begin. But again, just join me one more time tomorrow when we talk about the full recap of the NHL's 30 teams in 30 days. So until then, this has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you all for joining me, and I'll see you all again tomorrow. Thank you all, and have a great day.